The first line of my story is this. I never meant to fall for my best friend's mother. It wasn't a thunderclap. It was a slow, quiet seep, like rain into dry earth. I met Elara when I was 10, a scrawny kid clinging to Ben's side. She was just Leo's mom, a graceful silhouette in the kitchen, her voice a soft hum in the background of our childhood. But now Ben was gone, off building a life on the other side of the country, and I was the one who kept showing up on her porch. This time it was to fix a leaky kitchen faucet. Her house always smelled of old books and the faint, clean scent of the lavender she grew by the back door. It was a scent that felt like peace. I'm so sorry to keep bothering you with all this, Leo, she said, her voice a low, melodic thread in the quiet afternoon. She stood a few feet away, arms crossed, watching me work. I could feel her gaze on the back of my neck, a tangible warmth. It's no bother, Elara. I never called her Mrs. Evans. Not anymore. The name Elara felt like a secret I'd been allowed to know. It's just the washer. An easy fix. I tightened the final nut and stood, my knees cracking a protest. When I turned, she was closer than I'd expected. Close enough that I could see the fine silver threads in her dark hair, the tiny lines that framed her eyes when she smiled her hesitant, almost shy smile. Her eyes were the color of sea glass, and right now, they held a trace of something that looked like embarrassment. You're always fixing things for me? She murmured, looking down at her hands. I feel so useless. You're not. The words came out too quickly, too firmly. I softened my tone. I like being useful to you. Her gaze lifted to mine, and the air in the kitchen shifted. It became thicker, charged with all the things we never said. The hum of the refrigerator faded into a distant buzz. I was acutely aware of the space between us, a distance I could cross with a single step. She reached out then, her movement hesitant. Her fingers, cool and gentle, brushed against my wrist, where a smudge of grease darkened my skin. The touch was fleeting, a whisper of contact, but it sent a jolt straight through me, settling deep in my chest. You have... She started, her voice barely a breath. She didn't finish. Her hand retreated, curling back into the safety of her own space. But her eyes stayed on mine, wide and a little startled, as if she'd surprised herself. My own hand trembled. I curled it into a fist to hide the tremor. I wanted to capture her hand, to feel the cool weight of it in mine. I wanted to tell her that these small repairs were just excuses, that the thing I really wanted to fix was the lonely shadow I sometimes saw in her eyes. The words were there, a solid weight on my tongue. Elara, look at me. Really look at me. But before I could speak, before I could shatter the delicate, terrifying silence between us, the sharp, insistent chime of the doorbell cut through the room. Her eyes widened, a flash of panic in their sea glass depths. She took a quick half-step back, breaking the spell. And the moment was gone. The doorbell was a neighbor dropping off a misdelivered package. A mundane interruption that felt, to me, like a reprieve from a sentence I wasn't ready to face. After the neighbor left, the silence in the hallway was different, heavier. It's for Ben, Elara said, holding the cardboard box as if it were lead. Some hiking gear he must have ordered before he left. She gave a small, hollow laugh. He never could remember to change his shipping address. I followed her back into the kitchen, watching the way her shoulders slumped just slightly. This house was too big for one person. She was too vibrant to be living in a museum of someone else's memories. I knew her husband had left years ago, a departure so quiet and clean it was like he'd been edited out of the picture. Ben's leaving was a different kind of abandonment, a second void. I think he just likes having an excuse for you to call him, I said, leaning against the counter. She looked at me, a real smile touching her eyes this time. Maybe. Or maybe he just knows his mother is terrible with online returns. She placed the box on the table, her fingers tracing its edges. He talks about you, you know, says you're the steady one, the one who doesn't get swept away by every new trend or person. There it was, the unspoken wall between us. I was his age. My life was supposed to be a whirlwind of trends and temporary people. Hers was supposed to be settled, defined. The perception of it was a third person in the room, judging us. "I'm not that steady," I admitted, my voice low. I looked at the smudge her fingers had left on my wrist, a ghost of her touch. "Some things sweep me right off my feet." Her breath caught a tiny, audible hitch. She turned to the sink, busying herself with filling the kettle, her movements a little too precise. "Tea?" she asked, her back to me. I didn't want tea. I wanted to close the distance between us. I wanted to stand behind her, to rest my hands on her shoulders and feel the tension there, to see if her skin was as soft as it looked. I noticed the delicate line of her neck, the way a few strands of hair had escaped her bun. I noticed everything, and I was sure my noticing was a neon sign. "I should probably go," I said, but I made no move to leave. She turned then, the kettle forgotten. "Don't." The word was out before she could stop it, raw and unguarded. Her cheeks flushed a delicate pink. "I mean, the rain. It's really coming down now." She was right. I hadn't even noticed the downpour outside, drumming a frantic rhythm against the window pane. We stood there, trapped not by the weather, but by the electricity arcing between us in the dim, rainy light. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and lavender, and the unspoken truth that I was no longer here for Ben, and she was no longer just my best friend's mother. The rain intensified, sheeting down the windows, turning the world outside into a blur of gray and green. We were in our own fragile bubble, the drumming on the roof the only sound. "It's a monsoon," Elara murmured, coming to stand beside me at the window. She was close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her arm. "Looks like I'm stuck," I said, my voice rough. Our eyes met in the glass reflection, a safer, ghostly version of the real thing. Her sea-glass eyes were dark with the storm, and something else. A question. I watched her reflection swallow, the delicate movement of her throat. Then, a sharp, electronic trill shattered the moment. Elara jumped, her hand flying to her chest. "My phone," she breathed, hurrying to the counter. She looked at the screen, and her entire posture froze. The color drained from her face. "It's Ben," she whispered, her voice tight with a sudden, sharp panic. She held the phone like a live wire. "Video call." The name was a bucket of ice water. Ben, my best friend. The one whose trust was the foundation of my life. The guilt was immediate and corrosive. "Answer it," I said, the words tasting like ash. I took a deliberate step back, putting physical distance between us, trying to erase the intimate space we just occupied. She accepted the call, forcing a bright, maternal smile onto her face. "Ben, sweetheart. Hey, Mom. Wow, it's dark there. Everything okay?" His voice, cheerful and familiar, filled the kitchen, a stark reminder of the world outside our bubble. "Just a bit of a storm," she said, her voice a little too high. "Leo's here, actually. He was fixing the faucet." She turned the phone, and suddenly I was staring at Ben's pixelated, smiling face on the screen. Leo, my man, still looking after my mom for me. The question, so innocent, felt like an accusation. "Always?" I managed, my own smile feeling like a cracked mask. "How's the West Coast?" We talked for a few minutes, a stilted, three-way conversation layered with subtext only Elara and I could hear. Every laugh felt forced, every glance between us charged with a new, terrifying secrecy. When he finally hung up, the silence that descended was profound. Elara placed the phone face down on the counter. She didn't look at me. I feel like I know. I cut in, my own heart hammering. The shame was a living thing, coiling in my gut. And then she turned. Her eyes were glistening, not with tears, but with a fierce, defiant intensity. She crossed the room in 3 quick strides, stopping just inches from me. The scent of lavender and rain enveloped me. "This is insane," she whispered, her gaze dropping to my lips. "I know," I repeated, my voice a hoarse whisper, my hand lifted of its own volition, my fingers brushing a stray, damp strand of hair from her cheek. The touch was electric. Her eyes fluttered closed for a second, and she leaned into my palm, a soft, surrendering sigh escaping her lips. We were closer than we had ever been, closer than we had any right to be. The space between our mouths was a promise and a threat, a distance I ached to cross, held back only by the ghost of a name and the crushing weight of what it would ruin. My thumb stroked her cheekbone, a slow, deliberate caress against skin as soft as I'd imagined. Her breath hitched, a shaky intake of air that I felt more than heard. The storm outside was a distant roar, the world reduced to the frantic beat of my heart and the small, warm space where our bodies almost touched. Elara, I breathed, her name a prayer and a confession. Her hands came up, not to push me away, but to clutch at the fabric of my shirt, her knuckles pressing into my chest. She was holding on, as if I were the only solid thing in a spinning room. Her eyes searched mine, wide and terrified and wanting. "We can't," she whispered, but the words had no force. They were a ghost of an objection, fading in the charged air between us. "Why?" The question was a low rumble, torn from a place deep inside me I tried to ignore. "Give me one real reason. Not Ben. Not what people will think. One reason that matters to you." She shook her head, a barely there movement. A single tear escaped, tracing a path down her cheek. I caught it with my thumb, my fingers curling to cradle the line of her jaw. Her skin was fever-warm. "I'm too old for you," she said, her voice breaking. "You're not. I'll ruin you," she breathed, her gaze dropping to my mouth. "I'll ruin this good, steady heart of yours. And I couldn't live with that." "You've already ruined me," I confessed, the truth of it settling in my bones. "From the moment you first said my name like it was something precious. Nothing has been the same since." A small, broken sound escaped her lips. She rose onto her toes, closing the last sliver of distance until her forehead rested against mine. Her eyes drifted shut. I could feel the whisper of her lashes, the warm puff of her breath mingling with mine, the scent of her, lavender and rain and something uniquely, essentially her, was all I could taste. My other hand found the small of her back, pressing her gently against me. She was pliant in my arms, a perfect, aching fit. Every rational thought, every thread of guilt, frayed and snapped under the weight of this single, undeniable truth. "Leo," she sighed, and it was surrender. My world narrowed to the space between our lips. I could feel the phantom pressure of them, the inevitable collision. My head tilted, my eyes started to close, every cell in my body straining toward hers. And then a sound. Not the rain, not our ragged breathing. A key. The sound of a key grating in the front door lock was like a gunshot. We flew apart. The space between us, once charged with heat, was now a frozen chasm. Elara's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with pure, undiluted terror. I stumbled back a step, my body thrumming with adrenaline and a sudden, cold dread. The front door swung open, followed by a familiar, cheerful voice. "Mom?" Surprise. My conference got canceled, so "Whoa, Leo." "Hey." Ben stood in the hallway, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, his face breaking into a wide, easy grin. He dropped his bag and strode into the kitchen, completely oblivious to the emotional wreckage he'd just walked into. He pulled me into a rough, backslapping hug. "Man, I didn't expect to see you here." My body was rigid. I managed a choked sound that was supposed to be a greeting. Over his shoulder, I saw Elara gripping the edge of the counter, her knuckles white, her smile a brittle, fragile thing. "Ben, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Last-minute thing. Figured I'd surprise my favorite mom." He released me and turned to her, enveloping her in a bear hug. She met my eyes over his shoulder, her expression one of sheer, helpless panic. "We were just having tea," she said, the lie tasting bitter in the air. The kettle was cold on the stove. "In the dark." Ben laughed, flicking on the overhead light. The sudden brightness was brutal, exposing every flicker of guilt on our faces. He started talking, a torrent of words about his trip, his canceled plans, his flight. I wasn't listening. My entire being was focused on Elara. The way she kept smoothing her hair, a nervous, repetitive gesture. The way she wouldn't look at me for more than a second. The faint tremor in her hand as she reached for a mug. I moved to the sink, pretending to need a glass of water, just to have something to do with my hands. As I passed behind her, my arm brushed against her back. It was the briefest, most accidental contact, but she flinched as if burned, a sharp, involuntary intake of breath hissing between her teeth. Ben stopped mid-sentence. "You okay, Mom?" "Fine," she whispered, her voice strangled. "Just startled me." He looked from her to me, his brow furrowing for the first time. The easy grin was gone, replaced by a flicker of confusion. The air, which had been thick with our secret, was now thick with his dawning suspicion. In that moment, standing in the harsh kitchen light with my best friend's questioning eyes on me and the taste of her still on my lips, I knew. The hiding was over. This secret was too big to contain. The decision was made for me. It was no longer a question of if everything would shatter, but when. And I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that I would be the one to swing the hammer. The next hour was a special kind of torture. Ben's presence, once a comfort, was now a cage. He filled the space with his loud, easy energy, completely unaware of the fault lines cracking open beneath his feet. Elara moved around the kitchen like a ghost, making him a snack, her answers to his questions short and distant. I could feel her slipping away, retreating behind the wall of Leo's mom, and the panic was a cold fist in my gut. I had to stop it. "Ben," I said, my voice cutting through his story about a failed PowerPoint presentation. "I need to talk to your mom, alone, about the gutters." The lie was flimsy, pathetic. Ben's fork stilled over his plate. He looked at me, then at his mother, who had gone perfectly still by the sink. The confusion in his eyes deepened into something harder, more knowing. "The gutters," he repeated, his tone flat. "Yes," Elara said, her voice barely audible. She wouldn't look at either of us. It won't take long." Ben leaned back in his chair, his gaze shifting between us, and gave a slow, single nod. "Right, the gutters." The air was thick with everything we weren't saying. I didn't wait. I walked out of the kitchen and into the dim hallway, not checking to see if she followed. A moment later, I heard her soft footsteps behind me. I led her to the small, enclosed porch at the back of the house, a space crowded with forgotten gardening tools and the sweet, suffocating scent of damp earth. The second the door clicked shut, she spoke, her voice a frantic whisper. "Leo, this has to stop. He knows, or he suspects. We can't." I turned and caught her face in my hands, cutting off her words. Her eyes were wild with fear, but beneath it, a desperate longing mirrored my own. "I don't care," I whispered, my thumbs stroking her cheeks. "I don't care what he suspects. I only care what you feel. Look at me, Elara. Please." A sob escaped her. "I'm terrified." "So am I." I leaned closer, until our foreheads touched. Our breath mingled in the small, shadowed space. Our bodies were inches apart, the heat between us a tangible force. "But I'm more terrified of going back to a life where I only get to stand in your kitchen and pretend." Her hands came up, gripping my wrists, not to pull them away, but to hold them there, to anchor herself. Her eyes searched mine, and in their sea-glass depths, I saw the war she was fighting, fear against a truth too powerful to deny. "Tell me," I breathed, my voice raw. "Tell me to leave and I will. I'll walk out that door and you'll never see me again. But if you don't." I left the sentence hanging, a final, fragile thread. She was silent for a lifetime, her chest rising and falling in shallow, frantic breaths. Then, a single, clear tear traced a path over my thumb. "Don't go," she whispered. And in those two words, the world we knew ended, and a new, impossible one began. We didn't kiss. Not then. The moment was too vast, too fragile for that. Instead, I wrapped my arms around her, and she melted into me, her face buried in the hollow of my neck. She was trembling, and I held her tighter, my hand cradling the back of her head. We stood like that for a long time in the quiet, dusty porch, two people shipwrecked by a feeling too strong to fight any longer. It wasn't a passionate embrace. It was a surrender. Coming home. "I've been so lonely," she whispered into my collar, the confession muffled and raw. "I know," I murmured into her hair. "So have I." When she finally pulled back, her eyes were red-rimmed but clear. The fear was still there, but it was no longer in charge. She reached up and traced the line of my jaw, her touch hesitant, as if memorizing me. "People will talk. Your friends. Ben. Let them." I caught her hand, lacing my fingers through hers. The fit was perfect. "Ben is my brother. But this is my heart. And I'm not giving it up." A real, weary, and beautiful smile finally broke through. "When did you get so wise?" "Around the time I started falling in love with you." The words hung in the air, no longer terrifying, but true. She didn't say it back, not with words. She didn't have to. She led me to the old wicker love seat, its cushions faded by the sun, and we sat, her head resting on my shoulder, my arm around her. We watched the rain slow to a gentle drizzle through the grimy window. Her hand was in mine, our fingers intertwined, her thumb making slow, absent circles on my skin. It wasn't a perfect, storybook ending. We hadn't solved the age gap or the complicated web of friends and family. The world outside this little porch was still full of complications. But the war was over. The resistance had crumbled. I pressed a kiss to her forehead, a soft, lingering promise. She sighed, a contented, peaceful sound I knew I would spend the rest of my life trying to hear again. We just sat there, in the quiet aftermath, closer than we had ever been, with nothing left to hide. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next? Let me know in the comments.